Hey everybody, how you doing? Mike Davis here. Glad you are on with me. It's a little bit after 4, so forgive me for being just a little bit late. Waiting for some of the other participants to come into the room here for our final session on, and I got somebody just came into the room here. And so this is our final session on the emotionally successful marriage, how to live happily ever after from the inside out. And I just want to welcome all of you that are watching on Facebook. Just again, to reiterate what I said before, this was a class that I had been doing with the participants in our group, the Emotionally Successful Marriage Group. They paid for this class. We had 5 sessions, and I added 2 more extra bonus sessions. And today is the very last sessions. And hey, Charles, glad to see you're with us. And hey, Ted, glad to see you're with us here on Facebook. And for those of you that are coming into the room, glad you are here with me also. So as I was working on what we're going to be talking about today and putting together the outline, gathering the information and putting it all together in one place, I realized this was something that was really important, something I thought that everyone should have a part of, and not just our group. Since this was an extra bonus session, I thought, well, I think other people could really benefit from this. So this is why we're broadcasting it live. And in our sessions on the emotionally successful marriage, we've talked about a variety of things. What is it that creates and makes for an emotionally successful marriage? I got 2 cameras coming on, so I'm going to be looking back and forth. But what is it that makes for a successful marriage? What is it that makes for what I call an emotionally successful marriage, where you're living happily ever after from the inside out? I believe that is possible, that you can live happily ever after. Doesn't mean that there won't be problems. Doesn't mean you won't have some difficulties along the way, but that the majority of your marriage life can be one of joy. It can be one of love. It can be one of peace. And so we talked about that you need to know that you always have a choice when it comes to how you live, how you react, how you respond in your married life. You always have a choice about what you think. You always have a choice about how you feel. You always have a choice about how you behave where your marriage is concerned. We talked about the importance of choice. We talked about the importance of taking what I call 100% responsibility for yourself. I call it the 100% solution. And in that 100% solution, that's the second key foundational pillar. One is you always have a choice. Number 2, you've got to take 100% responsibility for what you're thinking and for what you are feeling. And so that is also very important. And by the way, for those of you that are part of the class, we are here in Zoom. If you want to, I sent the Zoom link out to everyone. So if you want to join me in the Zoom room, I'm here also. But you want to take 100% responsibility for yourself, which means that you don't hold or you don't blame other people for what you're thinking, for what you're feeling, and for how you act and behave, especially your partner. You don't hold them responsible. You hold yourself responsible. And that is said not to condemn, but to empower. If you take full 100% responsibility for yourself, and especially for your emotional well-being, you will never be at effect where your mind and emotions and behaviors are concerned, but you will be at cause. You won't be in a situation where you're waiting for someone to do something for you so that you will be happy. You'll be able to generate your happiness from within yourself. You'll generate your sense of worth and value from within yourself. And this enables you to be the type of person that you want to be in the marriage relationship. One of the things that we said that it's so important that you take 100% responsibility. And also the third one here that I'm going to talk about, and hey, Jarrett, the third thing that we said is a foundational pillar is that you begin to create and transform your own experience. You create and transform your own experience, which deals with being able to have and exercise more choice and control over your mental and emotional states. You've got to exercise more control. If you're going to have what I call the emotionally successful marriage, where you're living happily ever after from the inside out, one of the things that you absolutely must do is to exercise more emotional choice and more emotional control where yourself is concerned. This enables you to show up and be your best self in your relationship, in your marriage. You can be your best self, because one of the keys to really having an emotionally successful marriage is you've got to show up, and you've got to show up consistently in your best self, or as your best self. You got to show up and bring your best self, I like to say. You got to bring your best self to the relationship. Now, this doesn't mean you're going to do it 100% of the time. That's why I use the word consistently. You want to consistently bring your best self to the relationship. And so that is so very, very important, that you bring your best self to the relationship. And Charles, I see you've joined me online. Glad to have you, Charles. So these are the three things. Number one, you always have a choice about what you think. You always have a choice about how you feel. You always have a choice about what you're going to do. Okay, you exercise that choice. Your choices determine your responses. Your responses determine your experience and determines the experience of your relationship. Number two, the 100% solution. You've got to take 100% responsibility for your mental and emotional well-being. This means you don't hold someone else responsible. Now, other people can contribute to your well-being. Other people, and especially if we're talking within the context of relationships, the context of marriage, other people can contribute to your spouse, your fiance. They can contribute to your happiness. They can contribute to your joy, but you don't hold them responsible. They can contribute and affirm your self-worth, your self-esteem, but you don't hold them responsible for it. Because if they're responsible for it, and for whatever reason, they are out of sorts that day, for whatever reason, they're not able to give you what you need, then what are you going to do? So you don't want to be in a position where you are so dependent upon, you don't, as I like to say, you don't want to make your emotional well-being, your love, your joy, your peace, your self-worth, your self-esteem. You don't want to make it dependent upon or limited to someone or something that's outside of your control. You want to take responsibility for it. And the third one is taking responsibility to where you create and you transform your own experience. Dr. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who was a professor, he wrote a book called, and he's an author, he wrote a book called Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience. And he said that people who are able to control their internal experience will be able to determine the quality of their lives. The quality of the life you live is determined by your internal experience. And Dr. Csikszentmihalyi said, if you're able to control, people who are able to control their internal experience will be able to determine the quality of their life. I like to adapt that, and we adapted that in our class to say, if you control if you control your inner experience, you will be able to determine the quality of your marriage relationship. So one of the keys is you've got to be able to create and transform your own experience. If you don't like what you're currently experiencing, what I always like to say is change it. If you don't like what you're currently experiencing, and if you're married, it is you and your wife. It's you and your wife, or if the person that you're in a relationship, the other person, you and that other person, you are the ones that create the experience that you're currently having. So if you're having an experience you don't like, change it. If you're having an experience within yourself that you don't like, that's leading you to respond, that's leading you to act in ways that you don't care for, change it. You have charge. And in our seminar, in our workshop, we talked about different ways of being able to create and transform your experience. Today is the very last session on this. So I want to read a couple of passages that we have here in the handout. And if you like to be able to get the handout, just let me know. And who else do we have? Leilani, glad to see that you're on here with me. Now, folks, for those of you watching on Facebook, I got to attend to the people here. They paid for this workshop, so I want to make sure I'm paying attention to them. Leilani, glad you're here with us, as well as also Charles and Karen, my wife.
Hey.
Hi, glad you're here. And we also got people on Facebook that are watching Leilani, so I'll be talking back and forth between the two of you.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so today, we're going to be talking about forgiveness, letting go of how to let go of the hurt and the pain. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Again, we have a quote here on our handout, and for those of you that are interested in getting the handout, just let me know in the comments section. For those of you on Facebook, for those of you that are here on Zoom and in the seminar, you have access to that. But if you'd like to say, hey, Mike, I like a handout, let us know in the comment section the information on how you can get the handout. Okay, so Dr. Patricia Kovac said, we are not passive victims of our feelings and of our emotions. Dr. Nathaniel Brandon said, if we are not at war with ourselves, we are less likely to be at war with others. And this is really true. One of the reasons we've got so much difficulty sometimes in our relationships and in our marriages is because we become passive victims of our feelings and our emotions. We've got a war going on within us emotionally. So one of the keys to an emotionally successful marriage, and we talked about this in our last session, is that you've got to manage your internal or emotional states. It's absolutely critical. It's an absolute critical life practice for marriage to be what I call an emotionally successful marriage. You've got to practice managing your own emotional states. Now, this is especially true in the area of forgiveness. The ability to forgive, the ability to let go of hurt, of pain, of resentment, of anger, it's absolutely crucial to your relationships. It's absolutely crucial to your marriage. If you want to have a marriage where you are actually and truly living a happily ever after experience, then you've got to learn, you've got to practice as a way of life, the habit and the art of forgiveness. You've got to practice that. It's absolutely essential. One of the reasons that people have such difficulties is because they do not practice and they're unable to get to forgiveness. And see, Jared said, okay, great. Jared said he'd like a handout. Jared, we'll get you the handout. So if you want a marriage where you're happy, if you want a marriage where you're enjoying each other, you've got to practice forgiveness. Unforgiveness is detrimental to a relationship. And listen, one of the reasons you've got to practice forgiveness is because in relationships, as human beings, we're not perfect. We are going to mess up. We're going to do things that are just stupid. We're going to do things that hurt each other. So this is why we've got to practice forgiveness. And it has to be a lifelong practice of forgiving each other for the mistakes, for the missteps, for the mess ups that we do. I've had to ask Karen to forgive me for things over the years, over our almost 31 years of being married, 34 years of being together. I've had to ask her to forgive me many a times for things that I've messed up on. And she's asked me to forgive her. That's what we do. That's how you keep things going. Okay, so one of the things we have to look at is that unforgiveness itself is absolutely, whoa, I just lost all the people on Facebook. Why did that happen? Not sure what happened there, but for everybody who's on Facebook, I just lost you. Let me go back here. Not sure how that happened. I've never had that happen before. Wow. Hang on for a second, people on Zoom. Okay, for those of you that are on Facebook, I'm back. I don't know what happened. All of a sudden, everything just went out. That never happened to me before. So if you're back here on Facebook, let me know that you're back and that you can see me again. I'm going to keep moving forward here with our group. And again, I apologize for that. For some reason, Facebook just decided to go dead, and I'm not sure what happened there. So if you're on Facebook, you can see me. Let me know that you can see me, and let me know that you're back. Okay, Justina is watching. Glad to see you, Justina. And for anyone else, just give me a quick, hey, Mike, you're back. Glad to have you back. Yeah, everything seems to be working fine on my end. I'm not sure exactly why I got lost all of a sudden. Okay, but anyway, we're here, we're back, we're moving forward. Hey, Myra, glad you're here with us. Myra is with us in our Facebook group. Glad you're here, Myra. And Kathleen, glad to see you. And there are people coming back. Yes, you are back. Hi, guys. Sorry, I don't know what happened. All of a sudden, Facebook just went poof, and everything went away. I'm not sure what happened there. Okay, so again, we're talking about the fact that unforgiveness is detrimental to a relationship. It's detrimental to us also personally, not only to the relationship. Unforgiveness is detrimental to us personally. First of all, unforgiveness will definitely break a relationship down. And it will break us down also in terms of our mental and emotional health. One of the things I'm convinced of is this, and I base this off of the neurosciences, I base this off of psychology. We are not made for unforgiveness. We are not made for bitterness. We are not made for anger. We're not made for resentment. To have those things long-term, chronically, we are not made for those things. If we hold on to unforgiveness, if we hold on to anger and bitterness and hurt, where it's chronic, where it becomes toxic in our lives, it can cause things. And I did some research on this. One of the things that we found out is that unforgiveness, anger, bitterness, hurt, stress, or hurt can cause stress, anxiety, heart disease, high blood pressure, a weakened immune system, panic attacks, depression. All of this can come out of, and it can come from unforgiveness. So unforgiveness can cause all of these things, okay? Unforgiveness, again, bitterness, anger, hurt can cause anxiety, panic attacks, heart disease, high blood pressure, a weakened immune system. It will break us down physically, mentally, emotionally. But here's the thing that's amazing that they found in doing the research about forgiveness. Forgiveness can actually reverse all of these things. They found that when people are actually forgiving, it can lower the blood pressure. It can help with cardiovascular disease and begin to reverse it. It can help to strengthen your immune system when you practice forgiving. It can help to alleviate depression when you practice forgiving. So forgiving is good for us. unforgiving, being unforgiving is bad for us. When the unforgiveness is when we, in other words, if you're hanging on to, anger and bitterness, if you're hanging on to hurt and it's long-term and it's chronic and it becomes toxic, it is not good for us. What forgiveness does is that it clears the way of all of these different things that can keep a relationship from flourishing. We want our relationships to flourish. Forgiveness helps to remove out of the way everything that can keep a relationship from flourishing, from thriving. It removes out of the way that can keep us from thriving and flourishing personally. So this is why forgiveness is so very important. Now, to forgive, we need to be clear about what forgiveness is. We need to be clear about what forgiveness is not. So I want to ask a question real quick, especially of the people here in my group. I want to ask you, and for those of you that are on Facebook, I invite you to write this in the comment section. From your perspective, what is forgiveness? How would you define forgiveness? And you can write either on the chat or you can turn on your mic and come on and just share with me real quick. And I'll repeat your answers out loud so the people watching on Facebook can know how you're answering. But for those of you on Facebook, write in the comment section your answer to this question. What, from your perspective, what is forgiveness? For those of you in the group, how would you define forgiveness? What would you say forgiveness is? Again, just turn on your mic if you want and just come on and share. Or you can write it in the chat. We have a chat that's available also. What exactly is forgiveness?
Mike, to me,
yes.
it's like letting go of a perceived wrong. I mean, if somebody does me and I get irritated, I let it go.
Okay. So Myra, you said it's letting go of a perceived wrong. That's a good one. I like that. Anyone else? How would you define forgiveness? What is forgiveness for you? Charles said you no longer want revenge or to get even. That's a good one. You no longer want revenge or to get even? Even? Anyone else? What is forgiveness? From your perspective, what is forgiveness? How would you define it? So Jared said literally letting whatever it is go, letting it go. Great. Leilani, you said letting go of negative emotions and anger that you're holding against a person. Good. Charles says with forgiveness, you're not burdened by thinking about the past. That's a good one, Charles. You're not burdened about thinking about the past. That's a nice way of putting it. You're not burdened by thinking about the past. You let that burden go. Anyone else before we move on? I see Jared again said letting whatever it is go. Anyone else on Facebook? What would you say is forgiveness before I move on here? See, I don't see anything else from anyone else. All right. So those are some really good ones in terms of what forgiveness is. Let's talk about real quick what forgiveness is not before I start to move on into what forgiveness is. What forgiveness is not is, first of all, forgiveness is not pretending that nothing happened. That's not forgiveness. So forgiveness is not pretending that nothing happened. Forgiveness is not letting someone get away with wrong. This is how some people struggle with forgiveness. Like I see some other things coming up here. They said, John said, letting go of negative thoughts and emotions. That's forgiveness, letting go of negative thoughts and emotions. Great, thank you, John. Forgiveness is not pretending that nothing happened. It is not letting someone get away with wrong. Forgiveness is not addressing a wrong, okay? So when we're in forgiveness, this doesn't mean that we don't address what someone did, that we do not address what someone did because we're trying to forgive. So I don't want to talk about it. You know, let's not talk about it. Let's get over it. Let's move on. That's not forgiveness. So it is not addressing a wrong. When you are forgiving, one of the things you do is in order to forgive, you've got to address actually what went wrong. Forgiveness is not simply saying, oh, it's okay, when it's truly not okay. I used to do that a lot when people would say, hey, forgive me for doing that. Oh, it's okay. And it wasn't okay. I was hurt by it. But for some reason, I thought I had to let the person know, oh, no, it's okay. And forgiveness can be a difficult, forgiveness is not saying it's okay when it's not, when it truly is not okay. Forgiveness is acknowledging that something is not okay. And by the way, I was going to say, for the people here in Zoom, anything you want to say, any comments, jump in at any time. Myra, go ahead.
It's interesting that you say exactly that, because that is exactly why in the past I have struggled with forgiveness. I will say it's okay to basically, in my experience, to step all over me or to treat me the way you are treating me because I'm going to forgive you.
Yeah.
but the issue was never addressed.
Right. So Myra was saying that one of the things that she struggled, she's one of our participants, that saying that it's okay when it wasn't. You were saying, Myra, can give people permission just to step all over you, or you're like, it wasn't that important.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And that can be a difficulty, when we say things like that, and it gives people the wrong impression. So it's not saying it's okay when it's not okay. Forgiveness is also not ignoring, stuffing, or suppressing your hurt and pain. I love the fact that so many of you, both here in the group and also on Facebook, you're saying it's letting go of hurt and pain, letting go of the negative emotions. Because what a lot of people do, and what we want to be clear about, is that we're not confusing suppressing, stuffing, or ignoring painful feelings and emotions with truly letting them go. Because a lot of times that's what people think forgiveness is. So I ignore how I feel, because one of the things that's often said about forgiveness is has nothing to do with your feelings. Forgiveness is not about your feelings. Of course it's about your feelings. One of the reasons we need to forgive. Forgiveness is about your feelings, but it is definitely not ignoring your feelings, your hurt, your pain. It's not stuffing it, nor is it suppressing it. It's not doing that. It is letting it go, but we want to make sure that we are truly letting it go and not just simply stuffing it, not ignoring it. For instance, sometimes people are told to forgive, and they're just told, you need to forgive and move on. You need to forgive and move on. And I do not recommend that. Forgiveness can be a process. Forgiveness can take some time in terms of processing through certain feelings and emotions. You do have to begin at some point to forgive, but forgiveness is never about beginning by stuffing what you're feeling or ignoring what you're feeling. It is acknowledging what you're feeling and then dealing with it. You've got to deal with how you feel so that you can move from a place of being in continual hurt and pain so you can be free, okay? So forgiveness is, let me say it one more time, forgiveness is not pretending that nothing happened. It is not letting someone get away with wrong. This is one of the reasons people struggle with forgiveness. Well, if I forgive them, then I'm saying it wasn't that important. I'm letting them get away with it. No, it's not letting people get away. It is not addressing a wrong. You always address it. It is not saying, oh, it's okay, when it truly is not okay. And it is not ignoring, stuffing, or suppressing your hurt or your pain. So what is forgiveness? As some of you said, and I have some of the same things here. Forgiveness is letting go of bitterness. It's letting go of resentment and anger that we have towards another because of what they've done to us, or that we perceive that they've done to us. Whether they've actually done something or we perceive it. If we're feeling any bitterness or resentment or anger, forgiveness, one aspect of forgiveness is letting those feelings of bitterness and resentment and anger go that we have towards another person. We let it go, and we can have it in response to what they have done to us, okay? So one of the ways I like to say, and how I like to think about forgiveness is releasing someone from the emotional debt that they owe me, or that I feel that they owe me. It's releasing someone from the emotional debt that they owe me, or I feel that they owe me. Dr. Fred Luskin, and let's see, yeah, I do have the book here. This is one of my favorite books on forgiveness. It's called Forgive for Good by Dr. Fred Luskin. For those of you in Zoom land, here's the book here, Forgive for Good by Dr. Fred Luskin. Highly recommend this book. It's one of my favorite books on forgiveness. Dr. Fred Luskin, in his book Forgive for Good, said this: when things happen that we don't like, it is normal to feel hurt and anger. However, hurt and anger are meant to be fleeting emotions, not permanent fixtures. I love that. Hurt and anger are meant to be fleeting emotions, not permanent fixtures. So listen, when people do things that you don't like, when people violate your values, when they violate your boundaries, it is normal and natural to feel angry or hurt where that is concerned. What doesn't get to be normal and natural is when we hold on to it and we don't let it go. And what I mean by normal and natural, to hold on to them because of the detrimental effects that it begins to have upon us. That lets us know, as Dr. Luskin said here, that emotions are meant to be hurt and anger are meant to be fleeting emotions, not permanent fixtures. Now, let me say this too, in case you don't know who Dr. Fred Luskin is. He wrote this book, Forgive for Good, but and it's a proven prescription for health and happiness. But he was the director and the co-founder of the Stanford University Forgiveness project. They actually did a forgiveness project at Stanford University. I'm not sure if he's still the head of it. I was watching a video that he did in 2015 where he talked about the fact that he had been in charge of the project for 20 years at that time of this video. So it's been almost 25 years now. So I'm not sure if he's still head of it or not, but he started the Stanford Forgiveness Project, and they began studying forgiveness. It was one of the first like university sponsored studies that was done on forgiveness. Since then, many other studies have been done. And they begin to look at what is it that enables people to forgive? And they studied people, as I understand it, from around the world. People who had been in horrendous situations, people who had experienced things that, well, they studied everything from what we could call small offenses to things that you might think, man, there's no way I could ever forgive that. And they found that people in many situations that we think would be unforgivable, they were able to forgive. And they begin to look at and begin to consider, how is it that people are able to forgive? What is it that enables people to forgive? And he finally wrote a book on this. This program has been very useful and very successful at helping people to achieve forgiveness. It's not written from a religious or spiritual or even Christian perspective. It's just the science, the research that they've done that can help people to forgive. So again, it's a book that I highly recommend. But he says, again, that when things happen things happen, and I like to say things that we don't like, it's normal to feel hurt and anger. However, hurt and anger are meant to be fleeting emotions, not permanent fixtures. He also said, just because someone hurt you does not mean that you have to suffer indefinitely. That is so important. People are going to hurt us. People are going to disappoint us. People are going to say and do things that we really don't like, and we wish they had not said them or done them. However, just because we've been hurt does not mean, and I agree with Dr. Luskin on this, that you have to suffer indefinitely. Somebody once said that pain in life is inevitable, but misery or suffering is inevitable. Things are going to happen that we suffer. Suffering is inevitable. Pain is inevitable, but misery is optional. Misery is something that we can live in. It can be a response that we have to our pain and suffering, but it doesn't have to be. And we don't have to live in misery. We can forgive. Okay. So number one, forgiveness is about letting go of bitterness and resentment and anger that we have towards someone else because of something that they've done or that we perceive they have done. Number two, forgiveness is no longer responding, reacting, or relating to another person on the basis of past hurts, pains, or wounds. Forgiveness is no longer responding, reacting, or relating to another person on the basis of past hurts, pains, or wounds. Now, this is really important again. Some of you, and those of you here in Zoom and those of you on Facebook, let me ask you a question. How many of you have ever heard the phrase forgive and forget? You ever heard of that? Give me a thumbs up on Facebook if you've heard forgive and forget. Those of you here on Facebook, give me a thumbs up or say, yeah, Mike, I've heard of that before. Forgive and forget. A lot of people don't like that because of what it seems to imply. And I was listening to Dr. Luskin, and he said, well, how can you forget? You just can't forget. How can you expect people to forget things? Well, and basically the idea of forgive and forget actually comes from the Bible. But forgetting, biblically speaking, does not mean you develop amnesia and that you can no longer recall a memory. That's not the idea in the Bible. Actually, the biblical concept of forgiveness is really important, especially forgetting. It's really important because to forgive and to forget, or to forget, I'll focus on that, it means that I'm no longer going to relate to you. I'm no longer going to treat the person who hurt me on the basis of what they have done to me. So I'm no longer going to relate to you. I'm no longer going to respond to you. I'm not going to treat you based upon the hurt that you've inflicted upon me. I'm not going to do it. When I have forgiven you and I have forgotten simply means I am not going to treat you. It's an ancient Near Eastern way of thinking about it. I'm not going to treat you on the basis of what you have done to me, how you have violated my rules, my standards, my boundaries. So like when God says in the Bible that he forgives and he forgets, it's not that God develops divine amnesia. It's the idea of God is not going to relate to us and treat us on the basis of our past transgressions. It's the same way when we, quote, forget. I can recall what you've done, And by the way, to remember, if I don't forgive you and I always remember what you've done, the idea behind remember is I allow what you've done to me to shape my actions towards you. So unforgiveness is holding in mind, holding in heart what you've done to me, and I allow that to shape my reactions and how I relate to you. When I'm in unforgiveness, I'm letting something of the past shape my actions and behaviors, my emotions in the present, and that's how I'm going to relate to you based off of something that happened in the past, whether it was the past of 2 years ago or 20 years ago or 2 minutes ago. I'm letting it shape how I relate to you right now. So when I am forgiving you, that means I'm no longer going to respond to you or react to you or relate to you on the basis of hurt that you may have afflicted upon me. I'm going to let it go and I'm going to respond to you differently. Okay. Number 3, forgiveness is replacing my hurt, my pain, my bitterness with emotional wholeness and well-being. Forgiveness means I'm replacing my hurt, my pain, and my bitterness with self-esteem, with joy, with peace, with contentment, with gratitude, with love, with fulfillment. That's the idea. When I'm forgiving, I'm going to replace what I call emotional scarcity with emotional abundance. I'm going to replace emotional pain with emotional fulfillment. That is an aspect of forgiveness. So when you're forgiving, you're no longer allowing your emotional well-being to dwell in someone else's hands. When you're forgiving, you're not making someone else responsible for your emotional well-being. You're taking responsible for your emotional well-being when you forgive. So when I say you replace your hurt with emotional well-being, with emotional wholeness, that means you begin to take responsibility for your emotional well-being. That's one of the most important things that I learned early on about forgiveness. When I really began to study this and I began to meditate on it, I began to realize if I'm going to forgive people and I'm going to walk in forgiveness, I've got to take responsibility for my emotional well-being and not make someone else. Not even making the person who has hurt me, not making the person who has said or done something that violated my values, my boundaries. I'm not even going to make them responsible for my joy and my happiness. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to take responsibility for it. Okay, so that's number 3. Number 4, forgiveness is letting go of hurt and pain from a place of wholeness and fulfillment within me. Now let me say that again, because it sounds like number 3, but it's actually different. Forgiveness is letting go of hurt and pain from a place of wholeness and fulfillment that is within me. I'm going to talk about this in more detail, but it's not just forgiving so I can get to a place of wholeness and fulfillment. It's forgiving from a place of wholeness and fulfillment. We'll talk about that in detail in just a moment. Forgiveness, and I love this. Now, I didn't come up with this. I learned this from a guy I was listening to named Jack Cornfield, and he said this, and I thought, oh, that's so great. He said, excuse me, I thought I got to put this into the lesson today. Forgiveness means no longer being loyal to our hurt and to our pain. Forgiveness means no longer being loyal to our hurt and pain. When I first heard that, I went, wow, that's interesting. Now, when I am forgiving, it means I let go of the belief that if I forgive, then, let me put it like this. Sometimes we are loyal to our hurt. We're loyal to our pain because we believe if I forgive, this means I don't care about myself. If I forgive what someone did to me, that means I don't forgive to myself. Let me just tell you something. Okay. Ted asked the question, does treating the offender not based on the offense mean that trust is restored? Not necessarily, no. And that's a great question. So let me say that again. Ted asked the question, if I don't treat the offender on the basis of what they've done, does that mean that trust has necessarily been restored? No, it does not. Trust is consistency over time. In order for me to truly trust you, you need to show yourself trustworthy. Now, I can provide space. I can give you the opportunity to show yourself that you are trustworthy, but it doesn't necessarily mean because I am no, in other words, the way we tend to treat people when they have mistreated us, it goes back to what Jesus said. You know, someone slaps you on the cheek, Jesus said, turn the other. The way most of us tend to live is somebody slaps you on the cheek, slap them back, okay? They slapped you, you slap them. You get them before they get you. The idea of forgiving and forgetting, in other words, I'm not going to treat you, it's like, I'm not going to treat you that way. For those of us that are Christians, for those of us who have certain spiritual values. This means I'm going to treat you according to my faith. I'm going to treat you according to my values. I'm going to treat you with love. Like Jesus said, or the Bible actually says, if your enemy is hungry, feed them. If they're thirsty, give them something to drink. I'm going to do that even though you may have mistreated me. I'm going to treat you well. I'm going to treat you good, even though you have treated me bad. It goes back to the saying in the Bible, don't be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So I'm going to respond to you in a way that is good, even though, quote, you may not deserve it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that trust has been truly and fully restored. If I am the offender and I've done something over and over again, the fact that you have chosen to remain in relationship with me provides space for me to show you that I can be trustworthy. But it does not necessarily mean that trust has been restored, because trust is, as I heard somebody say a long time ago, trust is consistency over time. So I've got to show consistency in my behavior before I'm fully trusting you again. Okay. John said, notate, it just makes you smarter. Good point, John. All right, so going back to what we said before, forgiveness means no longer being loyal to our hurt and to our pain. So sometimes when we have been hurt, we may be loyal to our hurt and pain because we think that if I let go of this hurt and pain, this means I don't care about myself. Or if someone has hurt maybe a member of my family, if I let go of this hurt and pain, this means that I don't care about them. So I may think of it as hanging on to my hurt and pain as being loyal to myself, caring about myself, or being loyal to and caring about someone else. So I'm going to stay angry at you because this shows that I care. It shows that I care about you, myself, or it shows that I care about this person that you hurt. And if I let go of that, that means that I don't care. And it doesn't necessarily mean that at all. It's like sometimes people will hang on to grief because they feel like if I let go of grief, I'm grieving over someone who died. I remember I actually dealt with a family about this, and I was asked to work with them. They were struggling with grief over the death of a loved one. It was a mother and a father and 3 siblings. And the mother and father, their son had died for the 3 siblings, and it was their brother. And they were struggling with the feeling of just sadness and grief. Everybody but the dad. The dad was not struggling, but all the rest of the family was struggling. And one of the things as I worked with them on the phone, I was coaching them and found out, they were ready to let go of the grief. They were ready, because I always ask the question, are you ready to let this go? Do you feel like you've grieved enough? They felt like they had grieved enough. They wanted to let it go, but they were stuck. How do I let this go? So one of the things we found out was a belief that they had, that some of them had. If I let the grief go, matter of fact, the mother really had this more than anyone else. If I let my grief go, it means that I don't really care about my son. If I let my grief go, it means that I don't miss him anymore. And so she was being loyal to the pain of the grief. She was keeping the grief as a way of showing that she loved her son and missed her son. So we had to do a little bit of what we call reframing around that. And I asked her the question because she wasn't going to be able to let it go as long as she held on to this is what letting the grief go means. It means I don't care about my son. It means I don't miss him anymore. And by the way, this is one of the reasons the mom and some of the kids were mad at the dad, because the dad he had let go of the grief. He was moving on, and they felt like, you don't care. You don't care. And he's like, what do you mean I don't care? This is my son. Your son, he's also my son. He was your brother, but he's my son. What do you mean I don't care? But I said, well, how is it that you're able to go on? And so I did something with them that I'm going to do a little bit later with all of you that are watching, if you're willing and open to do it, and you're ready to let some stuff go. We did a process with them where they were able to let it go. But one of the things I had to do with the mom first was we had to change how she thought about it. We had to change the meaning of letting go. And one of the ways I was able to achieve that with her was to ask her, if your son was here, do you think he would say to you, yeah, hang on to this pain because that's really how you show that you love me? Would he say that to you? She said, well, no, he would not say that. I said, what do you think he would say to you? He would say to me, Mom, you got to go on. You got to let it go. I know you love me. Now, this was the mom speaking. And because the mother was a Christian, I said, and you believe he's in heaven, right? Yeah. Do you believe he understands now much more clearer than he ever understood it here on earth? She said, yeah. I said, do you think he really knows much more clearly than even we know that you love him? And that letting go doesn't mean that you don't love him, but letting go means that you're going to honor his life by continuing to living on and being happy and joyful. She goes, yeah. And she said, now that you say it that way, I think I can let this go. And all members of the family were able to let it go. They're able to let it go. The reason for telling that story is that sometimes we hold on to certain emotions because of what we feel that those emotions mean. And so if I'm hanging on to my anger, if I'm hanging on to my hurt because I think, well, if I let it go, this means I don't care about myself. This means that I don't care about someone else if I let the anger go. And so there are times people think, if someone did something to a family member, family members will, take sides and they go like, well, how can you forgive this person? How can you let this go? Because in their minds, it is saying you don't care. You don't care. So one of the reasons sometimes, one of the things we have to understand about forgiveness is that forgiveness means that I no longer am loyal to my hurt and pain. I stop using the pain. I stop using the hurt and the anger. I stop using other toxic emotions as a way of protecting myself. I stop using it as a way of showing that I care either about myself or someone else. I don't need to do that. There are other ways to show that I care. I don't have to hang on to feelings of bitterness and resentment, chronic anger to show that I care. So forgiveness means no longer being loyal to our hurt and pain. So what are some of the things that can prevent us from forgiving? Now, I've been talking for a while, so let me stop. Let me ask my group here on Zoom, and for those of you watching on Facebook, I'd like you to take a moment and think about this, and then either come on and share with me your thoughts or write in the chat section here on Zoom or on Facebook. What prevents us from forgiving? What are some of the things that get in the way of us forgiving? Yeah, and yeah, Justina, you're right. Yeah, there's an unspoken understanding that you must grieve for long periods of time. Otherwise, it's perceived that, and I think she's saying that you don't care. You're right, Justina. There are people who feel like you have to grieve for long periods of time as a way of showing that you truly care. Okay, so what are some things that prevent us from forgiving? What are some things that get in the way for just forgiving other people, letting go of hurt and pain, angerness, resentment? So Zoom group, what do you come up with? What's your thoughts? And for those of you on Facebook, you can also answer this question in the chat, and I'll read off your chat. So what are some of the things that get in the way that prevent us from forgiving? Myra, Leilani, okay. Karen said a reoccurring offense, that can get in the way. Charles said, we're just so mad, you don't want to. That's a good one, Charles. Just so mad, you just don't want to. Yeah, the anger, the intensity can be so great, you just don't want to forgive. Myra, you have something you want to say?
I can go back, harken back to my self-perception of being basically a doormat. Mm-hmm. So my forgive and forget has always left me open for the same repetitive behavior. Mm-hmm. For me. So I literally become, I feel like a great deal of my life I've been a doormat, for lack of a better
You feel like you've been a doormat.
Term.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so forgive and forget, is that something that for you has gotten in the way?
Well, I forgive and forget, and the same behavior has been repeated. So it's,
by the other person.
My learned response has been to just hang on to it. It's just like, no, if I forgive and I let it pass, you're just going to do this again to me.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
I hang on to it.
Okay, so I hang on to it because if I forget and let it go, you're going to do this to me again.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. That's a good one. Let's see. Jared said the selfishness of control can be one of the things. Actually, that's very true. We want to be in control. So that's one thing. Let's see. Charles says we want to, but our mind keeps going back to the offense. Leilani said, like you said, wanting to be loyal and not wanting the same thing to happen again. Karen says it can shut down the conversation if the offense is repeated. Yes. Now, of course, it's funny. Biblically speaking, Jesus said, if your brother sins against you and turns to you, or actually the question was raised within the context of Jesus talking with his disciples in the Bible. If my brother sins against me 7 times, should I, if my brother sins against me, I'll forgive him 7 times. And Jesus said, listen, if he sins against you, forgive him 70 times 7, which is not, 490 times. It's the idea of if he turns to you and asks for forgiveness, continually forgive them, forgive the person, forgive them. In other words, our heart needs to be open to forgive people, even sometimes when people do the same things over and over. However, if people are not changing and they refuse to change and they keep hurting us, there does come a time when you draw a limit and you go, you know what? You're not respecting me or this relationship. Do you really care about this relationship? Now, this needs to be within the context, I would say, of being in a relationship with other people who can help you to really see, is this someone who is doing something because they don't know how to stop? As somebody who works with people a lot, I can tell you that sometimes people do some certain things over and over again because they don't know how to stop. It's not an excuse. They really don't know how. And my job often is to help them to learn how. But then there are sometimes the people, they're not going to change. And I've met people like that. And they're like, this is the way, I don't see why I have to change. That's when I say you need to reevaluate the relationship. Is this someone that I need to be in relationship with if they're going to keep doing something that's detrimental? Let's see. Justina said the trust has been so violated that there is no room to forgive or excuse their action. Yeah, trust has been violated so much that can create a problem. And see, we said if we don't forgive them, it can continue to hurt them. Yeah, if we don't forgive others, it can continue to hurt. Let me say this too about forgiveness. What I've seen in a lot of the literature on forgiveness, with the exception of for the most part, the Christian literature, but in most secular literature, scientific literature, psychological literature, they will say forgiveness is for you, it is not for the other person. Within the context of which they're speaking, yes, I could say that because that's how they're teaching it. For those of us that are Christians and hold to a biblical worldview, that's actually really not true. Forgiveness, as it was understood in Jesus' day and Paul's day, the purpose of forgiveness is to reestablish relationships. So it is for you and it is for the other person for the purpose of reestablishing a relationship. But there are guidelines where that is concerned. I think this is a problem sometimes. We don't talk about the guidelines about relationships. We don't talk about how that there are certain, there's criteria involved. It's not just like, oh, I'll just forgive you and you can just misuse me and mistreat me and it doesn't matter because I'll just forgive you over and over and over again. That is not the idea. There are guidelines. There are certain things that are said that needs to be done if an offense gets repeated over and over and over again. And so that's something we need to be aware of. But forgiveness is for you, but it is also for the other person. Because again, if you want to maintain the relationship, then you've got to forgive. That's not only for you, it's for the other person. Okay, so it's both. So this is the one area where I disagree with some of the research that's done where they go, well, it's not for the other person, it's just for you. Now they say that often in order to get people to move to a place of forgiveness, because they're like, well, I don't want to forgive the other person. And they go, well, it's not, you know what? Don't think about it as being for them. Think about it as being for you. So I understand that. But if you are wanting to maintain a relationship with someone and you want to move forward, then you have to recognize that forgiveness is it operates not only in your benefit, but it also benefits the other person. Okay, so things that, let me see, is there anything else here? Kathleen said, amen. Okay, all right, so what prevents us from forgiving? Everything that everyone has said is true. Here's a couple of other things. Number one, fear of future hurt and pain. This is kind of what some of you have been saying. If I forgive, I might get hurt again. Myra, you spoke to that. I think Leilani may have said to that. I don't want the same thing to happen again. So we can hold back forgiveness, because if I open my heart to you and I get back in relationship with you, I might be hurt again. A second one is similar to this, is fear of embarrassment or shame. Anybody here have that? And on Facebook, where you're afraid of embarrassment or shame? It's the idea that fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So we can avoid forgiving because we're afraid of being made a fool. We are afraid of looking foolish. Has anybody other than me ever had that?
Oh, good Lord.
Myra said, oh, good Lord. Let me give you a quick story. Myra, did you have something you want to say to that?
No, I'll let you do your story and then we'll.
Okay. We had a family situation one time where a member of the family did something to another member of the family. This is a member of the family who was a member of the family through marriage. They did something to a blood relative of mine, and they end up leaving the relationship. And, you know, I'm like, okay, cool, they're gone. And I'll never forget, I was at the store and I was walking in my car, and this thought came to me, what if so-and-so comes back? And this is the person who had left, who had did harm to another family member. What if they come back? And I was like, yeah, they're not coming back. And I just was saying that, nah, they won't be coming back. And the thought kept pressing itself. What if they come back? And I thought, they're not coming back. And I felt like this was something that God was speaking in my heart. So finally I said, Lord, I don't think they're coming back. And what I heard was this, you need to forgive them. You need to forgive them. I think it was like a month later, this person came back. This person came. I was shocked. I was surprised. They came back. And I had difficulty because they were embraced by the family member that they had hurt. They forgave them. I needed to forgive them. Being one of the oldest members of the household in this particular family unit, I needed to forgive them. And this is several years ago. And I found myself struggling to forgive them. And I don't normally have a problem forgiving people, but I was struggling to forgive them. And I kept thinking about it, and I just find that I couldn't open my heart to this person. I couldn't. So I started praying. I'm like, man, why am I struggling? What's going on? I'm asking God, Lord, show me. You know, that's how I tend. When I find myself struggling with something, I begin to pray and go, God, will you show me why am I struggling with this? And so what came to me and what I started to see was I didn't want to look like a fool. What was in my mind was, if I forgive them, what if they do it again? I forgive them, I open my heart. What if they do it again? I'm gonna look like a dummy. I'm gonna look like I got fooled. And I don't want to look like I got fooled. I don't want to look like a dummy. So I'm not forgiving them because nobody's gonna make me look like a dummy. And that was my concern. And then I thought, okay, so how do I get past that? Because I don't want to look like a dummy. You know. And as I prayed about it, this is what helped me, and this is what came to my mind. I thought about, and I felt like the Lord began opening my mind to things where in my relationship with him where I have fallen short, where I have sinned. And what was coming to me was this thought. Michael, have you ever, this is literally how it came to my mind. Michael, have you ever sinned against me or sinned against God? Yes. Have you ever sinned against God, asking for forgiveness, and you knew he forgave you? Yes. And then you left and you went and did the same thing over again? I went, yeah. And you came back and you asked God for forgiveness? Yes. Did he forgive you? Yes. Have you ever asked God to forgive you for something that you did it again? You asked him to forgive you again. You went back out and you did it again? I was like, yes. And then it hit me. And I believe the Lord started showing me, Michael, I forgave you every time you asked me to forgive you. But I knew as God that you were going to do it again. I knew how many more times you were going to do it before you finally stopped. But I forgave you every single time. And I went, whoa. And I realized in that moment that God was not concerned about being made to look like a fool or foolish or stupid or dumb. That he was able to forgive, that it was really truly a godly thing to be able to forgive someone and let it go. And that it doesn't mean that I was foolish. It doesn't mean that I was a dummy. That it meant that I was operating out of my values. I was operating out of who I perceived myself to really be. And when I saw that in that moment, that this is what God does and this is what I can do, I was able to forgive the person and I just let it go. And guess what? The person did it again. They did it again, but I didn't feel like a dummy. And I'm still able to extend forgiveness towards them. And I don't feel like a fool. Now, this doesn't mean that if they were to come back again, I haven't seen them in years, but if they came back again, does it mean that I'd be like, oh, yes, no, we're going to trust you, like the question that Ted asked me. No, I'd be like, all right, I would embrace you as a human being. I would do you good. I would not do you evil. But to get to a place of trust, you're going to have to show yourself trustworthy. I will give you the space to do so. But it doesn't mean that you have full 100% trust. It means I'm going to allow you to show yourself trustworthy. Okay, but I can forgive you. Charles, you say you have a comment? Go ahead, Charles.
I think it might possibly help in some circumstances if we recognize that God's forgiven them for that offense. That person's gone to God and God has we assume God's forgiven them.
Mm-hmm.
But if they've gone to God and asked for forgiveness, we can ask ourselves, well, who am I to hold forgiveness for this person when God has? That's husband. That's nerve. That's that's not right. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus did a whole parable. And what Charles said, for those of you on Facebook, if a person who's hurt us has gone to God and asked God forgiveness, and we know God has forgiven us, we assume God will forgive them. Who are we to hold an offense against them? And Jesus did a whole parable on that, about the king forgiving a servant who had a great debt, and then the servant didn't forgive his fellow servant who had a smaller debt. And basically the king said, hey, I forgave you a great debt. How is it that you're not forgiving your fellow servant? So yeah, now for many people that will work, and there is a way actually to get that to work for you that I teach when I coach people for forgiveness. For some people, I've had this happen too. People, I was like, well, God forgive them. They'll look at me and they go, I ain't God. They just flat out tell me I'm not God. I'm like, well, yeah, that's true. That's true. So there, but for many people, it becomes a thing when you consider God's grace towards the person and consider God's grace and compassion towards you. It can become a basis for forgiving other people. Okay, so one of the things that can keep us from forgiving. Thank you, Charles, for that comment.
Right, Mike, I've got another comment.
Oh, go ahead.
I just realized that sometimes people don't forgive themselves. And
yes.
Good grief, if God has forgiven us, then who are we to be continuing to be upset at ourselves and withhold forgiveness from ourselves?
Right. Yeah. So one of the things that was just said here, folks, is that sometimes we don't forgive ourselves. And if God forgives us, who are we to hold things against ourselves? Very true statement. Very true statement. Matter of fact, I like to think of self-forgiveness as being one with God in his forgiveness towards me. That when I forgive myself, I'm joining with God. So he's forgiven me. So I'm going to take on his attitude, his mindset towards me. I'm going to be one with God in his forgiveness towards me. So it's a good point, Charles. So one of the reasons another reason we don't forgive is because of fear of shame and embarrassment. We struggle to forgive sometimes because we're trying, and this is a big one, we're trying to forgive out of or from what I call an inner deficit or inner scarcity. We're trying to forgive from inner deficit or inner scarcity. In other words, we're trying to forgive while we are still in pain and still hurting. We may feel like, when we're in a place of inner scarcity or inner deficit, we don't feel like we have what it takes to forgive. So we feel like, listen, to the person who hurt us, our mindset might be, you still owe me, and I cannot forgive you until you pay me back what you owe me. Sometimes we can feel like you took something from me. That can be my sense of worth, my sense of value, my sense of peace. You took it from me, my sense of security. You took it from me. Until I get it back, I can't forgive you. And so we see the other person as being in our debt. And so if someone is in our debt, that means we are lacking something. So it can be hard to forgive when you have an inner sense of lack, of scarcity, or deficit. If you notice in the Bible, one of the ways the Bible talks about forgiveness, it utilizes the metaphor of debt. Like in the Lord's Prayer, forgive us of our debts as we forgive our debtors, as we forgive those who owe us. That debt, in terms of our own inner emotional life, can be it can be that inner scarcity that we feel that causes pain. That pain is a signal. It is a sign that something within me that I need, that it's not there, or at least I don't sense that it's there. I feel like another person has taken something from me, so I have pain. And if I'm trying to forgive them while I'm in a place of pain, while I'm in a place of inner, what I call scarcity or inner deficit, and I feel like the other person's owe me, and I'm thinking to myself, I can't forgive you until you make amends. I can't forgive you until you pay me back. A lot of times we are calling on people to forgive while they are in that place. Can it be done? Yes, but it's really, really hard. It's really difficult for people to try to forgive when they are operating from a place of pain and hurt. For those of you here in Zoom and those of you on Facebook, comment on this. What do you guys think about that? Myra, Leilani, Kathleen, Charles, what do you think? And Karen, what do you think about that when being called on forgive when you're in such a place of hurt and pain and you don't feel like you have what it takes? Can it be difficult?
I want to say, Mike, I mean, and this is, I can only harken back to personal experience. It's like, you know, like Steve and I, we come from a unique perspective. We're newlyweds. We've been married a year, but we're older.
Yeah.
We bring a lot of baggage, basically, the relationship. I bring a lot of past, and that affects how I react. And it's like he may do something, and I'm struggling with the stuff from my past.
Right.
That makes it hard for me to deal with it. So it's not something, let's say, he has done per se.
Right.
But I harken back to, well, I go, gosh, I've been here before, and now here I am. Here we go again. You know, that kind of situation.
That's a good point, Myra. So sometimes, Myra was saying that sometimes in a relationship, it can be difficult for us because we're dealing with stuff from our past. We go into relationships with baggage. We may go into a relationship with inner deficits that are the result of past relationships, not necessarily present ones. So if you've been hurt in the past, some people will develop I'll give you a good point. My wife had developed where men was concerned because of all the abuse that she had suffered at the hands of men, that all men are dogs. So that is the way I was introduced to Karen, literally day one, within just a few minutes of meeting her. Not that, actually the way it was said was, "Hi, Mike, I want you to meet Karen. She doesn't like men." That was my introduction to Karen. And then as I got to know Karen, you know, one of the things that came out, and Karen, if you're on here, if you want to come on and say something about this, you can, dear. But Karen had this really, all men are dogs. That's a deficit. That's an inner scarcity. That's because of what men had done. But that was coming, it didn't really, that aspect of what she suffered didn't really impact our relationship. But other things did. So a lot of times your inner deficit, your inner scarcity can come from other relationships. So Myra, that's a very good point. And Leilani said, yes, it's hard to respond from a state of inner scarcity. And by inner scarcity, I mean, you feel like I don't have what it takes to forgive this other person. And so Myra, you made a very good point. That might be because of past relationships or the present relationship. Karen said, let's not forget, trauma can get encoded and triggered by similar patterns and situations. Yes, so trauma can get triggered. And as a result, we start operating out of fear. And I would say operating out of fear is operating out of a sense of what I call inner scarcity or deficit, because you don't feel secure. If I'm feeling fear, there's a lack of security there. So, and that can be caused by things that happened in my past. So Myra, thank you for sharing that. That was a very good point. I had not actually considered that. Okay, so these are the reasons why we can, these are the things that can prevent us from forgiving. Let me go back over them real quick again. Number one, fear of future hurt and pain, fear of embarrassment or shame. We are struggling to forgive because we try to forgive out of or from an inner deficit or scarcity. We lack on the inside of us, and that can prevent us from forgiving. Let's see, Jacina said, give ourselves times to heal and release it before committing to forgive them. I think this is fair. Yeah. So, and this is the thing I want to talk about now. There are basically two models of forgiveness. One in particular, especially for those of us that are Christians, that we were taught. Oh, let me see. Charles, I missed something you wrote there. Charles said, what do you do to forgive someone when you are in pain and you feel like they do owe you and you need to make it up and they need to make it up to you? We're going to talk about that. That's literally what we're getting ready to talk about now. It's a good question, Charles. So number one of the models for forgiveness, and this is the one that most of us have been taught, especially if you're a Christian, forgive in order to heal. You must forgive in order to heal. This model is basically saying, if you want to heal from your hurt and pain, you've got to first forgive. So if you got hurt and pain in your life, you want to get rid of it, you've got to forgive the other person. In this model, though, often what's implied or sometimes specifically said is you have to ignore your pain and your hurt. You have to ignore how you feel. Often it is said, sometimes within a Christian context, but I've also seen it in other contexts, forgiveness is not about feelings. And so if you're going to feel, you've got to ignore your hurt and your pain and extend forgiveness to the other person. And the idea of the model in this is taught, as you extend forgiveness to another, as you will let go of the pain and hurt, and then you're going to heal. So as you extend forgiveness, you let go of the pain and hurt, then you'll heal. If you do this, you'll no longer feel the hurt and the pain. Sometimes, well, if you extend forgiveness, you will eventually not feel the hurt and pain. When, we don't know. Sometimes in the future, we don't know when, at some point, the hurt and the pain will stop. It might be immediately, it might take some time, but if you forgive and you keep practicing forgiveness and you keep extending forgiveness to the other person, and even if you say to the person, well, what do you mean if I keep forgiving them, extending? Well, you got to let it go. Well, what does it mean to let it go? How do you let it go? I got to say this. Somebody was asking I was listening to Dr. Fred Luskin talk about this, and he said one of the questions people will often ask is, how do I know when I have forgiven? How do I, or how will I know when I have forgiven? You know, and he said one lady asked him one time, how did he put it? She said, well, here's my question, Dr. Fred. How will I know that I have forgiven the bastard? And that's how she put it. How will I know that I've forgiven the bastard? And I told that to Karen, I was watching, and I just laughed because he said, if you're referring to him that way, that probably is a sign that you haven't forgiven him yet. You probably haven't forgiven him yet. So a lot of times when people even say, they'll say, well, you know, I still have these feelings. I still have this hurt. I still have this pain. What they will be told is, well, keep forgiving and eventually it will go away. So this is the model, the forgive in order to heal model. Now, let me say this. This model has worked for many people. People operate in this model. But as again, it's a really, really hard model to put into practice because the hurt and the pain that you feel can actually get in the way of the very thing that you're being asked to do in this model. In other words, you're being asked to forgive while you're in pain, but the pain itself, as Charles said earlier, you can be so mad that you don't want to forgive. You can be so angry that you don't want to forgive. So the pain, the anger, the bitterness can actually get in the way of forgiveness because it's just so intense. And if that's true, if it gets in the way, then this means your healing is delayed. This model delays healing until you forgive. Technically speaking, let me say this, excuse me, because I'm getting ready to go into the second model, but there is actually nowhere where it's written, not even in the Bible, you cannot heal until you forgive. Nowhere does it say that. And I have to tell you, for years, I operated in that model because that's what I was taught. You can't heal until you forgive. You can't heal emotionally. You can't heal from your pain until you forgive. And I always thought, and as I started thinking about why people struggle, and this is how I started thinking about this, I started asking the question, why do people struggle with forgiveness? Why do they struggle? And I realized one of the reasons is how we're asking them to forgive. We are asking people when they are in the depths and the throes of pain, when they are hurting, when they feel like I am devalued, when they are feeling like I don't have any joy, I don't have any peace, and we're going, forgive, okay? That makes it extremely hard. Now, there are times when I've worked with people and I said, are you ready to forgive? And they're not ready. I find out as we talk about it, they're not ready because there's too much pain. And so then I have to shift to, okay, we need to get them out of the pain so they can begin to heal. But there's nothing that says, there's nothing, nowhere, it is not written in nature, it's not written in the Bible, that says you cannot heal until you forgive. That's what we say. And people will say, well, Mike, and I'm saying this for the benefit of all my Christian audience here and friends and family who say, well, doesn't the Bible says that, you know, if you want God to forgive you, you need to forgive. And we're not doing a Bible study here, so there's a lot to that. Yes, it does say that. However, what we're doing is we're conflating two things, forgiveness and healing, as if they are one and the same. So when people go, well, you know, God can't forgive you until you heal, and there's a lot to that, that is not saying, I mean, God can't forgive you until you forgive. That's not saying that you cannot be healed until you forgive. That is not what that verse is saying. And I've read the Bible and I've studied the Bible, and I can't find any verse that says, until you forgive, you cannot be healed of your hurt and your pain. I don't see it anywhere within the scriptures. So what can we do? There's another model. And this is a model that I began playing with years ago. And in terms of my own research, I can say I came to this conclusion. I came up with this other model. But since then, I've read the research of other people like Dr. Fred Luskin and others. They also hold to this model. And that is, you can heal in order to forgive. Not forgive in order to heal, but flip it. I came to this one day as I thought about people struggling. And I said, well, why do people struggle? Because we tell them they have to heal in order to, and they have to forgive in order to heal. And I just simply thought to myself, what if we flip the model? Rather than saying you've got to forgive in order to heal, what if we flip it and we simply say, listen, you need to heal in order to forgive? Karen says, we have no respect for the emotional pain until it is us dealing with the issue. Yeah, that's true. My wife said that. That's very true. A lot of times we don't have respect for the emotional pain of others until we are in emotional pain. Very, very true. Let's see. Somebody else wrote something here. Let me, before I move on, let me read some of these comments here. I don't want to miss what you guys are saying. So someone just wrote, oh, Karen says, sometimes we don't even know the full ramification of what is being forgiven. Simple. Car accident, insurance companies pays for future unknown issues. Complex issues, child is raped, molested. Issues don't appear until later. It's like a burn victim. We would never expect a burn victim to hug or reach out. Right. Yeah, exactly. We've got to have, for those of us that work with people, we definitely got to have compassion for people. Now, keep in mind, it is true. Listen, forgiveness is letting go of hurt and pain. So if a person holds on to hurt and pain, it can delay them from moving on in life and forgiving. So we want to assist them in a gentle manner with effective tools that can help them to heal so they can begin to express forgiveness. And many times it's a process. It's not all at once. Sometimes it may be a little bit at a time, but they can start the process. They can start to forgive little by little because they can start to heal little by little or a lot at a time. It all depends on the situation and the person. So I coach and I teach people to heal in order to forgive, or heal so that you can forgive from a place of wholeness and fulfillment. Heal so that you can forgive from a place of wholeness and fulfillment. This is the model that I utilize. When I first started teaching this, I got pushback. I literally had someone tell me, a pastor who was part of a pastoral counseling team, they go, no, you can't do that. I was like, why? And this is before I did all the research. I just thought it made much more sense. And when I went back to the Bible, in my opinion, this is actually the framework that the Bible teaches, that we should operate and forgive from a place of wholeness, from a place of fulfillment, not from a place of inner scarcity or debt or deficit. In this model that I'm talking about, heal in order to forgive, or forgiving from a place of wholeness and fulfillment, you either release hurt and pain and you replace it with emotional wholeness and well-being. So you release the pain and you welcome in wholeness and emotional well-being, or you utilize resourceful and positive emotions to heal and undo the effect of negative emotions like anger, pain. You can actually use positive emotions like love, joy, self-esteem to undo the effect of negative emotions. You can undo the effect of negative emotions with positive, resourceful emotion. The idea in either of these is to heal first, to come to a place and an experience of inner wholeness, a place of inner fulfillment, and from that place, from the place of fulfillment, from the place of wholeness, you forgive another person. So this is what I teach and what I coach people to do. And I'll be honest with you, I've had far more success in this than utilizing the other model. Because when you are forgiving in this way, you're not forgiving from an inner experience of inner deficit and scarcity. You're forgiving from a place and a condition of inner emotional abundance and wholeness. One thing I begin to see when I started teaching this is that God never calls us to do anything from a place of inner scarcity or lack or emptiness. We're never called in his call to obedience to us. We are never called to do anything from lack, from inner scarcity, inner lack, or emptiness. He calls us to live out of fullness of life. Jesus said, I've come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. So we are to live from a place of fullness and abundance of life. And this includes forgiving others. Love should come from a place of inner abundance. Love should come from a place of fulfillment, fullness. Kindness should come from a place of inner fulfillment and fullness. So forgiveness can be, and forgiveness should be, the fruit of fullness that we are living and operating out of. If we have within ourselves a inner sense of abundance and fullness, one of the fruits of that is forgiveness. But we've got to cultivate and learn how to live in that fullness. How to have forgiveness within how to have wholeness and how to have fulfillment within ourselves. And when we are think about it for a second. Let's take offenses for just a moment. When you are having a good day and you're having a happy day and someone does something that offends you, do you find it easier to let it go when you're in a place of happiness and joy? And give me a thumbs up on Facebook if you say yes. For those of you here, give me a thumbs up or just tell me yes. Yeah, when we're feeling happy, when we're feeling joyful, and someone does something, we gotta, it's no big deal. Hey, it's all right. You're cool, and we really mean it, and we let it go. We don't hold on to it. Let's see. Oh, Leslie said, accepting that my pain did not define another's intent, changing my thoughts and acknowledging that behavior is learned. I can't read the rest of this. I'll have to read the rest of it later. But Leslie said, one of the things we can do is accepting that my pain did not define another's intent. That's a very good point. So when we are in a place of being happy and joyful and fulfilled ourselves, it makes it so much easier. It makes it so much easier to let go of offenses. And this has been proven psychologically. It's been proven psychologically. Let's see. Oh, replying to Karen, thumbs up. Thank you, Justina. So one of the things is we want to begin to cultivate in our own lives much more emotional well-being. We want to cultivate more emotional well-being. So let me share with you 6 things that you can do, 6 steps to healing and developing what I call a forgiving spirit, where you're operating out of more wholeness, where you're operating out of more completeness, okay? Number 1, you've got to own your emotional well-being. You've got to own it. You got to take charge of it for yourself. You want to decide that you and you alone are responsible for your emotional well-being, and that you're not going to hold anyone else responsible for your emotional well-being from this day forward. Now, I always have to put this in here. I'm not saying that other people cannot contribute to your emotional well-being. What I am saying is that you want to own responsibility for it so that when other people are not contributing, you can still possess emotional well-being. Kathleen said, but the person who can hurt you can still hurt you. You can forgive and be in a good place, and the other can do what they have been doing. Right, and that's what I said before. And it's a good point that she made. If someone continues to hurt you, it is at that point that you have to ask the question, do I need to remain in a relationship with this person? Do I need to reevaluate my stance in terms of the relationship with the person? So that's something that, like I said before, I always coach people on, is that you don't want to stay in a place if a person is being abusive and they don't care about you and they don't care about the relationship. You want to be able to say, you know what, this is not a good place to be. This is not a good place for me to remain in. So good point. Thank you, Kathleen. So number 1, own your emotional well-being. Dr. Fred Luskin said, forgiveness is taking responsibility for how you feel. Forgiveness is taking responsibility for how you feel. And that's from his book. All these quotes that I'm quoting from him are from his book, Forgive for Good. So number 1, own your emotional well-being. Take responsibility for it. Number 2, decide that you are and you will be a person of forgiveness from this day forward. One of the things you want to do is own the identity of being a person of forgiveness. That I am one who forgives. And that's a decision that you make. Now, the other things I will share with you will let you and help you to live out that decision. But you've got to make this, you know what, I'm going to be a person of forgiveness. I'm not going to hold on to hurt and pain. I'm not going to make other people responsible for what I am or am not doing. I am going to be a person of forgiveness. So decide that you're going to be a person of forgiveness. Number 3, I can't go into detail on this, but you want to utilize what I call the pain-pleasure principle to move away from unforgiveness and towards forgiveness. Sometimes we get stuck in unforgiveness. What you want to do is move away from unforgiveness and move towards forgiveness. You've got to find the motivation to do it. One of the things that can help you is what I call the pain-pleasure principle, or I also refer to this as the pondering process. And this is where you give yourself compelling emotional reasons, not just intellectual reasons, but emotional reasons for not remaining in unforgiveness and bitterness and resentment. You've got to give yourself compelling emotional reasons. And also you want to give yourself compelling emotional reasons to forgive. One of the ways I've often helped myself to get unstuck from any hint of unforgiveness and I don't want to forgive, I'll sit down and I will ask myself what I call pondering process questions. This is where I think about what will it cost me if I stay in unforgiveness? And what will I gain? How will it benefit me if I choose to forgive? And you've got to do this on purpose. You've got to allow yourself to be willing to experience some of the pain of remaining in unforgiveness, because unforgiveness will cost you. And forgiveness will benefit you. I mean, I don't know of any scientist at this point who will contest that, because the benefits have been shown. Forgiveness will benefit you. Unforgiveness will cost you. And it's in every area, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, financially. It can really cost. So I actually have a whole teaching on this called the Pondering Process. If those of you on Facebook, if you want to know how you can get a hold of that teaching, I think you can get a hold of it for free. Let me know in the comment section. Those of you here in the Zoom room, we can give you access to it too, because I don't have time to get into that. There's a whole way of doing it. And Leslie said, I am so grateful for the ability to forgive so freely. Yeah, that's the other thing too. If you, Dr. Luskin said, and I agree with this, forgiveness is a skill, like any other skill. If you practice it enough, it gets easier and easier. I find it fairly easy for me to forgive now. It's not difficult for me to do. There was a time in life I used to hold a grudge. But now it's like, it's not just, to me, it's not worth it. I mean, because it doesn't do anything. It doesn't change anything. So you can use the pain and pleasure principle or the pondering process to move away from unforgiveness and towards forgiveness. Give yourself compelling emotional reasons to forgive. Give yourself compelling emotional reasons for not remaining in unforgiveness. And just, Jared said, send it my way. Okay, so Jared, you want the pondering process, so Karen is listening in, and if you let us know you want us to get it, we'll contact you and show you how to get hold of it. Okay, so number one, own your emotional well-being. Number two, decide that you are and will be a person of forgiveness from this day forward. Utilize the pain pleasure principle to move away from unforgiveness and towards forgiveness. That's number three. Number four is rewrite your story. And Charles said, was that part of your 30-day class? Yes, Charles, was part of the 30-day class. So it's in the 30-day rule for those of you who've been a part of that. Rewrite your story is one of the keys to forgiving, rewriting your story. What is that about? I heard a man by the name of Dan Bagley say one time, I was at a seminar or workshop, a training actually, and he said, there is no pain or pleasure outside of the stories that we tell ourselves. There is no pain or pleasure outside of the stories that we tell ourselves. And by the way, at the time, he was telling a story about his son who was young. His son had contracted this rare disease. I think his son was a teenager. He was in his teens, and his son ended up dying. And he was talking about how there was so much pain, and he had to deal with this pain. And this whole training that I was a part of was a training about how to help people to change, how to get out of pain. And so one of the things that he was teaching us was there is no pain or pleasure outside of the stories that we tell ourselves. The stories that we tell ourselves really, much more than we realize, contribute to the pain, to the suffering, to the misery that we experience. One of the things you want to do is change your story. Any pain, any ongoing pain, and I want you to hear me very closely, hear me very carefully, I should say. Any ongoing pain that we are experiencing based upon something that happened in the past is a result of the story that we are telling ourselves. We all tell ourselves stories about the events of our lives. We all tell ourselves stories. And the stories we tell ourselves will either lock us in pain or it will liberate us from the pain into forgiveness, into joy, into life. The stories we tell ourselves. So one of the things you want to look at is, what story am I telling myself about what has happened to me in the past? One of the things that Dr. Luskin talks about is your grievance story, your grievance story. This is a story that you tell yourself or others about your hurt and pain. And when you tell this story, either to yourself or other people, you end up reliving the experience. And when you relive the experience, you relive the pain. So in our grievance story, if the only story we have in our heads is a grievance story, this doesn't mean that you didn't go through something bad. This doesn't mean that something bad didn't happen. The question is, since it has happened, what is the continual story that you're telling yourself or others about what you went through? Because the story you tell will either lock you into pain, it will lock you into unforgiveness, it will lock you into suffering and misery, or the story you tell can liberate you. Here's the thing, When we do forgive people, if you've ever thought people that you've actually forgiven and you're still in forgiveness towards them, okay, you really have forgiven them, you look at the story you tell now, the story you tell is different. The story you tell yourself is different. When there is truly a change on the inside of us, when we experience a change mentally and emotionally, that means our story has changed. The narrative that we tell about what happened, it has changed. My wife will often say, one of the ways you can know that you have forgiven is you can talk about the memory and you can remember what happened, but the pain of the memory is no longer there. You have the memory of what happened, but the pain of the memory is no longer there. Dr. Fred Luskin talks about it this way. He says you can talk about what happened and your blood pressure doesn't go up. This is one of the ways you know you have moved truly into forgiveness. You can talk about it and your blood pressure doesn't go up. Okay? One of the ways to make this happen is to change your story. You've got to change from a grievance story to a hero story. So let me say this. This is how you do this. First of all, in the grievance story, you're always the victim. This is how you know you have a grievance story. You are always the victim. Now, don't misunderstand me. We're not saying that someone didn't hurt you. But as Dr. Luskin said, he said this, and I'm going to quote this now. He says, having people create stories in which they overcome the transgressions of others and are living a happy life is a step forward in the process of forgiveness. One of the things that's been recognized is that if you remain a victim in your story and you keep telling this story over and over, then you begin to re-victimize yourself. The first time someone hurt you, they victimize you. If we keep telling the same story year after year, we can end up victimizing ourselves. And that's what we don't want to do. It's not that the person didn't hurt you, they did, but what's the story that you're telling yourself? So here's one of the things you want to do. You want to identify, first of all, what's my grievance story? And we all, myself included, we've all had grievance stories. Write down that story. Get a sheet of paper, get a notebook, and write down your grievance story. What's the story you've been telling yourself that's been keeping you in pain? But write it down in the third person voice. In other words, don't write it in first person. This is what happened to me. This is what this person said to me. Write it down in the third person voice. This has been shown that when you write what happens to you in the third person, is that it is as if it happened to someone else. It enables you to get some distance from the hurt and the pain. You get some distance from the story, you get some distance from the pain. So one of the things you want to do is write down your grievance story. Identify what's the story in my head that I've been playing over and over again that keeps me locked in my pain. And then what you want to do then is, after you get the story all out, rewrite your story as a hero story. Rewrite. Now, this is for those of you that are saying, you know what, I'm tired of being in hurt. I'm tired of being in pain. I'm ready to move on. If you're not ready to move on, we're going to talk about that in just a moment, but you may need to work with somebody and get some help. But if you're saying, yeah, I'm ready to move on, Mike, I'm ready to move on from here, then write out your grievance story. And then you want to rewrite that story as a hero story. And this is a story about how you've overcome what happened to you. This is a story of how you have now come to a place of inner wholeness and well-being. It is a story of how you have forgiven and how you are now living your values, your faith, how you're living according to your own standards, how you're living a flourishing life. In this story, you are the hero of the story. So you want to write it in the first person present tense. Now, when you write the story, we're not saying that you've come to a place of healing and wholeness, but you want to write it as if you have come to a place. In other words, if you've overcome the unforgiveness, if you were to overcome the bitterness, if you were to overcome the pain, and you were living life the way you want it, and you were thriving, what story would you write? What's the story that you would write? How would you write about it? In other words, if you were able to step into the future, into a time and a place where you are operating from wholeness, you are operating from fulfillment, you are operating from joy, you are operating from solid self-worth and value. And because of that, you have now forgiven the other person. And you're going on and you're thriving and flourishing in life. What is the story you would tell? And how would you even talk about that past event that you've now overcome? Write a hero story. And it's a great way of helping you to move forward. To quote Fred Luskin one more time, having people create stories in which they overcome the transgressions of others and are living a happy life is a step forward in the process of forgiveness. So you want to write a hero story. Identify your grievance story first. Then once you get that all written out, write your hero story. Write that hero story. Number 5, step 5, choose to stop rehearsing the grievance victim story. You don't want to rehearse that story over and over and over again. You got to make a decision. I'm no longer going to rehearse this story. This is how I got out of blaming other people for what was going on in my life. As I have shared before, there was a time when I was blaming other people for where I was at. And the way I stopped, and there are some things that had happened to me. There are some things that other people had given me some advice that wasn't good advice, and I followed it. But I realized that I had to stop telling myself that other people are responsible for where I was at. And I didn't realize at the time I had identified my grievance story, and I changed it to one that where now I was responsible. And I still do that to this day. This is kind of what came out of that was 100% solution. And so I'm always putting myself at cause. For me, I am the hero of my story, where I look at how can I, and in my thinking, I can overcome all transgression against me. I can overcome all offenses against me. I can forgive anyone. Up to this point in my life, I've been pretty successful at doing that, and I give God thanks for it. I do believe it's because of His grace at work in my life, but I've been able to do that because of the story. There's a narrative that runs in my head about forgiving other people. But you want to stop rehearsing the grievance story. You got to decide, I'm not going to rehearse the story anymore, because if you rehearse the grievance story, that's how you build and maintain resentment. The word resentment is composed of 2 words, re, which means again, and sentir, which means to feel. Resentment literally means to feel again or to feel in turn. So resentment happens when we rehearse what has happened to us and we're feeling the bad feelings over and over again. We rehearse the original pain and we keep going back over it. We keep playing in our mind what happens to us. When we do that, it builds resentment because we keep feeling the pain over and over. And by the way, according to what the neuroscience tells us, whenever you remember something, you always reconstruct memories, which means we start adding things to it. So it's not just the original thing that happens, we also start to add things to the original story. And if we're feeling more pain, that means we've added more stuff to it that can make us feel even worse, okay? So what you want to do is, rather than rehearsing your victim story, your grievance story, rehearse your hero story. And you want to do that while feeling good. Rehearse your hero story while feeling good. Now, how do we do this? How do you rehearse it while feeling good? And this is the last step here. You want to cultivate on purpose positive feelings and emotions on a regular, and for those of you who have the handout, I have there in parentheses, daily basis. Cultivate on purpose positive feelings and emotions on a regular daily basis. Dr. Barbara Fredrickson, she's done a lot of research on positive emotions. And one of the things she's found in her research is that positive emotions can undo the effects of negative emotions. Positive emotions can undo the effects of negative emotions. One of the emotions that is fantastic for healing, you know, it's kind of like, my mother has been involved in the nutritional field. She helps people to develop healthy diets. She helps people to heal. And so I know she was always talking about, you know, this is really good for this. This is really good for that. And she would, you know, like turmeric is good for reducing inflammation. There are certain things that really work well, right? One of the emotions that is proven to be very powerful in undoing the effects of negative emotions is gratitude. So one of the emotions you really want to cultivate is gratitude. You really want to feel gratitude, feel appreciation, feel thankfulness for whatever, for life. But you just want to cultivate that on a daily basis. It is one of the most healing emotions. And this is based upon the research that has been done. So you want to cultivate gratitude. If you cultivate gratitude, that also lends to cultivating joy and happiness in your life. So cultivating gratitude will help to nurture joy and happiness. If you're nurturing gratitude, joy, and happiness, this will create an inner environment within yourself that makes it easier to forgive. Makes it easier to forgive if you cultivate an inner environment of happiness and joy through cultivating gratitude. So you want to cultivate and feel on purpose positive emotions. If you do this on a daily basis, this will fill your inner emotional fuel tank, okay? I always like to think of it, like you got your car, you want to keep driving. If you want to drive far, you got to keep your car filled with fuel. You got to keep it filled with gas. The gas of our life, the fuel, is positive emotions. Positive emotions will help to empower you to forgive when you need to forgive. The more positive, and I'm not talking about you got to be Pollyanna. It's just as a way of life, as your way of being. And I'm also not saying that you can never feel bad, that you can never feel, quote, negative emotions. All emotions have their place, all emotions. But what you want to do, if you want to have a forgiving spirit, develop a forgiving attitude, you want to develop, you want to nurture positive feelings in your heart and in your mind. Too many of us are running on empty. So we need to start filling up our gas tank, our emotional fuel tank. Too many of us are running on fumes. And I have been there. There have been times, especially, and this is another way that unforgiveness can work its way into our life. We go out in life and we deal with stuff and we deal with other people and we get drained. We get drained. And I know I always say that when I start to feel irritated with people, that's when I know I need to pull aside and get filled up, because my job is people and I'm working with people. And I don't want to ever feel irritated. And I don't want to start feeling like I don't like working with people, because that's my job, is to work with people. So one of the things we need to do is make sure we are filling up on a regular basis. And I would say even on a daily basis. And I have to say I'm guilty sometimes of not filling up my tank, my emotional fuel tank. And I have to pull aside and go, you know what? Let me go refuel. And so you want to do things that helps you to feel good within yourself on a consistent basis. And gratitude is one of the most important. It is a very healing emotion. So don't run on empty. Don't run on fumes. You want to make sure you're filling up your bank, your fuel tank. Sometimes I refer to this as filling up your emotional bank account. You want to make sure you keep funds in there so you don't get overdrawn. So make sure you keep putting in emotional funds, so that way when you make a withdrawal, you have enough in there to cover. Or if someone makes a withdrawal, someone says something, someone does something that makes a withdrawal from your emotional bank account, guess what? You said, you know what? I've been steadily saving up, so I know I've got enough money. And by the way, again, the research is showing if you feel positive emotions on a consistent basis, you do this on purpose, that it will build emotional resiliency within you. You will become emotionally strong, and that will enable you to deal with what other people are saying and doing that you don't like. You'll deal with it much more effectively, much more easily. But we've got to take time to take care of ourselves. So one of the things I'll say with this too before, and then I just want to lead you in a simple exercise. So I want you to start thinking about, if you've got some irritations with people, some things you're ready to let go of that you've been hanging on for a while, I'm going to walk you through an exercise that will help you to let it go. Okay? But let me say this real quick, is that, forgot what I was going to say. But we can become more emotionally strong if we take time to build up. So you want to make sure you're taking time for yourself. Don't allow yourself to run on empty. Now, sometimes when I'm driving the car, Karen will go, we need gas, because they'll be near empty. I'm going like, no, we're good. And she's like, no, we need to get some gas. Don't run on E. Make sure you're filling yourself up. Make your own emotional well-being a priority. Make it a priority. Don't wait for someone else to make it a priority. You make it a priority. Okay? So before I lead you this exercise, anybody have a question or a comment? And are you finding this to be helpful? Questions or comment, Facebook, let me know. You find this to be helpful? It's a lot here. I have decided that in the future, I'm going to do a whole seminar workshop on forgiveness, because as I was going through this, man, there's so many things we could do. We didn't have time to talk about a lot of different things and get more into the research of Dr. Fred Luskin. So I'm going to end up creating, and I'm going to do this, a workshop on forgiveness. So I'll let you know when that happens. All right, no questions, no comments. You finding this to be helpful? Charles said, I think everyone needs to figure out their own way to fill up their own tank. Oh, yes. Thank you, Charles. You just reminded me what I was going to say. One of the things you want to do is learn to really take in the good of life. Learn to savor the good of life. One of the things we often don't do, because we're so busy, is to stop and just savor. And what Dr. Rick Hansen calls taking in the good, savoring. This is something else that scientists and researchers in the realm of emotions and positive psychology are finding. You need to learn to savor. So when you have a positive experience, don't let that positive experience just go by. Go like, oh, that was fun. Take some time to literally stop and meditate on and focus on and really feel how good it is to have that experience, how good that experience feels. Hold that good positive feeling in your heart and your mind for just a few seconds longer. This literally helps to integrate it into your nervous system. I realize that we tend to do this with negative emotions. We'll hold, by the way your brain is constructed, when it comes to negative experiences, your brain is like Velcro. It'll just stick. When it comes to positive experiences, your brain tends to be like Teflon. Positive experience will just slide off. So in order to really integrate positive experiences, positive emotions, you have to give conscious, focused, deliberate attention to them. So when you have positive experiences, if you're with a friend, Jacina said, is there any such thing as an unforgivable sin? I would say, Jacina, from my perspective, the only sin that is unforgivable is the sin that a person chooses not to forgive. Because as I've done this research and I've read so many stories, people have forgiven other people for things that are just horrific, just absolutely horrific. And I've read stories of people who have forgiven rapists. And one lady, as a matter of fact, I was listening to a story the other day of a lady whose son was killed by this other young kid. And she ended up visiting this kid in prison who killed her son and started talking with him and developed a friendship and eventually forgave him. She said, I had to do it because I couldn't live with this unforgiveness. The kid got out of jail. She offered him a place to stay with her. And they began speaking together about forgiveness. And this kid didn't have any family. And she basically adopted him, not literally adopted, but metaphorically adopted him as her son. Now, someone else may say that I can't see that. And I can understand if somebody said they can't see it. What I'm trying to say is, let me put it to you like this. I truly believe that when the Bible says we're created in the image of God, we are. That our capacity to forgive is more than I think we even realize. So I would say that the only unforgivable sin is the sin that we absolutely refuse to forgive. But we can forgive anything. We absolutely can. I believe it's because of how we have been made. So that's my take on that, Jacina. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. Again, I just want to remind you, take in the good in life as a way, because if you focus on the good and take in the good and give some time to really just stay with the good experiences, positive experiences, that will become part of your nervous system, and your nervous system will become oriented towards feeling good versus oriented towards feeling bad. The reason we feel bad more often than feeling good is because we focus more on the bad than on the good. Whatever you give your mind to, you will develop a mind for. Whatever you give your mind to, you will orient your nervous system towards. So orient your nervous system towards that which is good, positive, healing, and resourceful. Okay? That includes thoughts, things you focus on, even present experiences. Orient yourself towards what is good by focusing in on it, deliberately giving your attention to it so it can become a part of you. All right. There is a process that was developed by a friend of mine, Dr. Bob Bodenhammer. And by the way, I know we've been going on for long here. If you need to go, please feel free to go. Don't want to keep anybody. But I just want to walk you through this process. If you've got something in your life that you say, you know what, I'm ready to let this go. And I would say, starting off, so you can get used to doing this exercise, pick something not humongous. Don't pick something that you go, I really need therapy for this, Mike. But pick something, maybe an irritation, or maybe somebody hurt your feelings, but you say, you know what, I'm ready to let this go. By the way, let me say this real quick too. I forgot this. If you find yourself still struggling to let things go, you may need to talk to someone. So find a pastoral counselor, find a counselor, a therapist, a coach who can help you to let it go and move towards it. Okay, there's nothing wrong with getting help. So if you find yourself stuck, if you find yourself unable to move forward towards forgiveness, get the help that you need, because it is not good to hang on to anger and forgiveness. Find someone who will help you walk through the process, who has a process to help you to let things go. So let me share this with you. I want you to think about something that you would like to let go of, that has bothered you. Maybe somebody said something to you that hurt you. Maybe someone said something to you that was offensive to you. And if you're able to say, Mike, I'm ready to let this go, I want you to utilize this for this next exercise. Once you learn this exercise, then you can start utilizing it. Once you learn this pattern, you can start utilizing it for anything you want in your life, okay? So if you got something in mind, what I want you to do next, I want you to sit up straight, wherever you're sitting, sit straight. Take a deep breath. And I want you to hold your chin level. Don't hold your chin down, don't hold it up too high, but just hold it level, maybe just a little up, but hold your chin level. And what I want you to do, and this exercise, I'm going to do it in slightly two different ways here. For those of you who are Christians and Christian oriented, you have a Christian faith, I want you to think about Jesus. And I want you to think about him in your mind. And when you think about Jesus, notice where in your mind, get a representation of him in your mind, however you think about Jesus. Notice where you see him in your mind. Is he in front of you? Is he beside you? Is he up high? Some people say, I see him in my heart. When you think about Jesus, where do you see him? And I'd like you to take your hand and point to where you see Jesus. Like when I think about Jesus for this exercise, I see him in front of me and he's kind of a little bit up high. And that to me represents that he's high and lifted up. What the Bible says. That's my representation in my mind. So I want you to notice, just point to him where you see him. Sometimes I see him directly in front of me. This time it's kind of high, kind of got a representation of him sitting on the throne. Right now he has a crown on his head. That's how I'm seeing him right now. You may see him differently. And just point to him. Okay? Now I want you to think about how Jesus feels about you. And I want you to make sure that as you look at Jesus, that he sees you and that your experience of him is one of love, is one of support, is one of comfort. And by the way, whatever you are going to utilize in this exercise, this can even be something that someone did to you, or if it is something that you've done and maybe you haven't forgiven yourself yet, but you're ready to let it go, utilize that also. You say, Mike, there's some things I've done I need to let go. Maybe some things you've been ashamed of. If you're ready to let it go, utilize it for this exercise. Maybe you recognize you've hurt some people and you've carried that and you felt so bad and guilty. It's time to let it go so you can begin to move on. And if you can, make amends to the other person, but you want to not have to do it from a place of just shame and guilt. So I want you to look at Jesus again. Make sure that when you look upon him, you don't have an experience of condemnation or shame, but it's one of love. It's one of support, that he's on your side and that he embraces you, not rejects you, but accepts you. And now I want you to bring to mind whatever it is that you're now ready to let go. And I want you to get an image in your mind of whatever it is that you're willing to let go right now. Represent it somehow in your mind. Now, it might be a feeling, and that's okay if all you have is a feeling. If you have an image, maybe it's somebody that hurt you, or maybe it's a scene from something of your past, or maybe it's just an image that represents the hurt and pain. But I just want you to have before you, however you represent that hurt and that pain, that shame. And I want you to ask yourself, am I ready to let this go? And if the answer is yes, I'm ready to let this go, I want you to take another deep breath. I want you to keep looking at Jesus, point to him. I want you to think about that thing that has caused you hurt and pain. And where do you see that in your mental space? Is it in front of you? Is it beside you? Is it within you? Is it behind you? Where do you see that thing that represents the hurt and the pain that you're ready to let go? And I want you to point to that. So I could point and say, well, mine is kind of right there. So Jesus is here, The thing that could cause me, has in the past caused some pain, is right here. So you should be two different positions, okay? Now what I want you to do is just look at Jesus one more time. Take a deep breath. Look at that image of the thing that represents the hurt, the pain that you are now ready to let go. And just with your eyes, I want you to lift up that image with your eyes. I want you to give it into the hands of Jesus. I want you to imagine him taking that hurt, that pain, that unforgiveness, that resentment, that bitterness, lift it up with your eyes and just give it into the hands of Jesus. And notice what happens. Notice what changes when you place it in Jesus' hands. Notice how your experience changes internally when you finally let it go and give it to him. And take a deep breath as you let it go. Exhale, just let it go into his hands once and for all. Now you might be saying at this moment, Mike, what if I don't have faith like you have in Jesus? Is there a way for me to still be able to do this? Yes, I want you to think about something that you have as a resource that you think of as supportive, that you think of as healing, as bringing comfort. Bob Bodenhammer, the man who created this, he tells the story of how he was working with a gentleman one time who didn't believe in Jesus. Bob asked him, well, what do you have that represents to you wholeness and healing and forgiveness and comfort? He says, my grandmother. He said, okay, get an image of your grandmother. Give that hurt and pain to your grandmother. So what do you have an image of that represents to you forgiveness, healing, wholeness? You may not have faith, because I have a lot of people watching this that may not be Christians. You don't subscribe to the Christian faith, but there's something that represents to you wholeness and healing and completeness. I want you to see that. I want you to take that thing that was hurtful and causing pain for you and just lift it up with your eyes as you exhale. And as you exhale, release it to that image of wholeness, comfort, healing. And notice what changes within you as you let go of the hurt and the pain. Notice what Jesus does with it when you give him all the hurt and all of the pain. As you let go of the shame, as you let go of the hurt feelings, those hurt words that were said to you. Maybe you see the action that the person did towards you and you just release that now to the Lord. And notice what happens when you do that. Just take a deep breath. And notice what you're experiencing different within yourself. And sometimes what you need to do is let it go a little bit at a time. Maybe you can't do it all at once. And so you can let a little bit go and let that go to Jesus. And maybe you notice there's still some of it left. Well, let a little bit more of it go. I've done that with people where they let it go a little bit at a time, little bit at a time. And they just kept giving a little bit at a time until they felt like he has it all now. And just do that if you need to do so. And notice what's different. Notice what changes within yourself. When you let go of the hurt, the pain, the words, the images that may have caused you hurt and pain, you let it all go as much as you can in the right amount. And maybe you can just say to yourself, Lord, I receive healing in this area. I receive your comfort. I receive peace. I receive fulfillment. I receive wholeness. If it's a person that you need to release, release that person to him. Whether they're alive or dead, just release it to him. And if you're able to do so, And as much as you're able to do so, you can say to the Lord, and Lord, as I release this person to you and what they did to me or said to me, how they treated me, Lord, at the place where I'm at now with this healing and wholeness, I forgive them. I let it go. Now you might need to say, Lord, this will be a continual work, but right now, right where I'm at, I let it go. I let it go. For my benefit, for their benefit, but especially for my benefit. I let it go. And there might be more that you need to let go in the future, but for right now where you're at, let yourself smile to say, yeah, this is a good place to start. This is a good place to start. So just take a moment, let that settle in. And as we're closing out here, I just want to say thank you for being with me and spending these past 2 hours with me. And I'd like you to share with me over in the chat pod, for those of you on Facebook, what are you experiencing as you just let this go? For those of you here on Zoom, if you could just share in the chat, what are you experiencing as you just let go as much as you can, as much as you want, the hurt, the pain, the shame, the words, the images. What are you experiencing within? Share it with me, as we just got a few more minutes before we close out. Charles said, feeling a sense of relief and calm. Good. Now, this is something that you can do throughout your day. This is something you can do at any moment. You can do this standing inside of a grocery store. You can do this walking down the street. You can do this in your morning devotions. If things come up, and many times when you start this process, things may start to come up. Just take it and do exactly what we did here. So Ernestine, you said peace and love. Great, fantastic. Do what you did here. Just take it, look to Jesus, just lift it up and give it to his hands. This is a way to start practicing letting go of hurt and pain. You can do it a little bit at a time, little bit at a time. Again, like I said, if you find that you're in need of help, get the help that you need. Talk to a pastoral counselor or a therapist or a relationship coach or someone who can help you walk through the process of letting even more of it grow so that you can flourish and prosper in your relationships and within yourself. Leilani, you said, so thankful, feeling loved and accepted by Jesus and like it never happened. Ira said, such peace, such a weight has been lifted. Great, great. It's wonderful to hear. All right, everyone, we are done for this evening. I hope you found this to be extremely helpful. Thank you all to the participants in our emotional success group. Thank you all for your your consistency in showing up and doing the exercises. And I pray for everyone that you will have relationships where you can live happily ever after, because you are living in an emotionally intelligent and an emotionally successful in your relationships. Doing that, you can live happily ever after from the inside out. So I'm gonna read one more thing. Justina said, I'm feeling very relaxed and weightless. I have joy knowing that I don't have to carry anything that is non-serving. Fantastic. All right, everyone, have a fantastic evening. If you have any questions, just write me and let me know. Thank you all again, and we will talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.